finally, we're going to answer the question you've all been asking.
Who's going to win this incredibly important presidential election?
Why does Decoded hate white people?
Oh, yeah. I was going to get to that.
Well, we don't.
Bullshit. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of The Battening. Now there's a new video out from MTV Decoded. MTV Decoded is a show hosted by a woman named Franchesca Ramsey. This show focuses heavily on race and is known for their catchphrase, "Fuck white people." Now this week's episode of Decoded is going to focus on generalizations of white people, white stereotypes, and institutional and systemic racism. What Franchesca is going to do is use an extremist victim complex to spiel that it is okay to judge an entire race based on preconceived and fabricated notions that all white people are racist, rather by real racism or systemic racism. She also believes that black people cannot be racist. Take a look.
Racial prejudice is not cool, but when a person of color discriminates or stereotypes a white person because of their race, in the United States, they don't have the institutional power to back them up and say that those feelings are okay.
Yes, they do, Francesca. It is called the First Amendment, and there is nowhere in the First Amendment that segregates freedom of speech by race. That is why you can get chants like this.
Pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon. 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 Pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon.
And speeches like this.
On everything. Tell his mama y'all sorry for her loss. Burning down shit ain't gonna help nothing. Y'all burning down shit we need in our community. Take that shit to the suburbs. Burn that shit down. We need our shit. We need our weed. I don't wear it, but we need it.
Yet you get news coverage from major news corporations like this.
Holding a vigil marked by prayers.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
With his sister calling for peace.
Don't bring the violence here and the ignorance here.
The media is chocked full of anti-white rhetoric. This is why sites like Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, and MTV capitalize on a trend of demeaning white people because it is now socially acceptable to rip on white people, yet if you say anything that's even factual about the black community or other minority communities, they label you as a racist, bigot, or xenophobe. For fuck's sake, Francesca, your entire show speaks out against stereotypes, generalizations, cultural appropriations, and other racial bullshit rhetoric, yet you combat these issues by using white stereotypes and generalizations about white people in an attempt to smear white people for the justification of your own racial bias.
There's overwhelming evidence that implicit racial bias is real, and institutional racism is still rampant in America and abroad today.
Francesca, this is why people do not respect you. Show us one example of a law that discriminates against black people or minorities. You can't and you won't. One thing that I can show you is that Black Lives Matters, which is responsible for inciting many violent acts across the country, is defended by our president himself.
I think the reason that the organizers used the phrase Black Lives Matters was not because they said they were suggesting nobody else's lives matter. Rather, what they were suggesting was there is a specific problem that is happening in the African American community that's not happening in other communities. And that is a legitimate issue that we've got to address.
The problem in black communities that Obama should be talking about is that over 90% of black murders are at the hands of other black people. Instead of figuring out and attempting to fix the real reasons as to why this is happening, Obama just goes along with the false narrative that white people are holding black people down. One of the major reasons that is suspected of contributing to black-on-black crime is the fact that 72% of black children grow up in single-parent households. You don't address these issues because they are damaging to your agenda. Okay, I've gotten off on a tangent. Let's get back to Franchesca explaining why her racial bias against white people is okay.
Whoa, okay, talking about oppression doesn't mean I hate white people. The problem is it's hard to get mad at systems and institutions instead of taking these conversations personally. When I criticize the school-to-prison pipeline, lack of police training, workplace discrimination, or our court system, some people don't want to hear it or think about it.
And by some people, she means white people. Franchesca, the reason nobody wants to listen to you about those subjects is that you are not an expert in any of them. You have a racial bias against white people that clouds your judgment on everything you talk about. A great example of this is this clip where you falsely explain why these men were shot by police.
The list of do's and don'ts for black people continues to grow. Don't be mentally ill. Don't fall asleep on a couch. Look, don't carry a pill bottle. Don't use the stairs. Don't play with toy guns. Don't call the police for help. Well, don't have a broken taillight. Don't have an attitude. Don't get in a car accident. Don't buy an air rifle in Walmart. Don't ride in a police van. Don't sell a loose cigarette. Don't walk in the middle of the road, man.
This is race baiting and you are 100% guilty of it. You should feel ashamed of yourself for instilling in young black minds that they could be killed for simply playing with a toy gun or walking down the street. Do you not see that what you are doing is harmful to the relations between police and the African American community? It's people like you, the Huffington Post, and all of these other mainstream media outlets for instilling this exaggerated fear into young black minds, which has led to much higher rates of violence. So when you talk about why we don't want to hear you talk about race relations, this is why, Franchesca.
Let's use preschool, for example. In a study done by the Department of Education, black children make up 18% of the preschool population, but represent almost half of all out-of-school suspensions. Basically, while a misbehaving white toddler might get time out, a black toddler is more likely to get sent home and have disciplinary action on their record.
Now, on first glance, you can take a very shallow look at this problem and come to the conclusion that these teachers have a racial bias. But if you look back at the stat that I brought up earlier, that 72% of black children grow up in a single-parent household, you may start to see a correlation between this and the discipline of young children. Now, Asian parents have a lower separation rate than white parents. I could not find any stats on the disciplinary action rate between Asian children and white children, but I would go as far as to say that there is going to be a correlation between the separation rate of parents and the discipline of their children.
For journalists who investigate these kinds of stats, they reach the conclusion that these suspensions are tied to teacher bias.
Cool. I'm gonna go with stats. Next.
This is a huge problem. Does it mean that all of these preschool teachers are racist? Not explicitly so, but they have bias, just like all of us.
Yes, Franny, we know you have a racial bias.
So let's check in with your feelings. Are you A, mad at the Department of Education for not training teachers better? B, mad at your state congressional representatives for not pushing for bigger education budgets? Or C, mad at me for talking about this because it's easier to direct your anger towards someone making you feel guilty instead of being angry at the complicated as world of institutional racism? If you chose C, please resist the urge to close your browser and instead keep listening.
Well, this is actually a very complicated subject, and honestly, you nor I have the expertise to really tell anybody how to fix this issue. But to get back onto the point of the entire video, we can be mad at you for helping contribute to this racial divide that is separating our country. Also for your mocking of white people with this moronic white character that you've created.
Well, isn't that just convenient? Let's just ignore what the dictionary says.
To make your normal moronic character seem a little bit smarter. Can you fucking imagine if it was a white person posting this who was doing a black impression?
You might have noticed, nowhere in there did I say white people are the problem.
Are you about to do that? Because I sense you're about to do that.
So, the next time you have the urge to say, Franchesca hates white people, please autocorrect to, Franchesca hates the historical roots of oppression that have led to today's societal conditions which allow institutions with white leadership to systemically discriminate against people of color.
So nowhere did you say that white people are the problem, followed by white leadership systemically discriminates against people of color. You fucking asshole. We see right through you, Franchesca.
It's clear that people who get mad about discussions of racism aren't actually listening to the criticisms.
Like how you said you don't watch the criticisms of your own videos?
They aren't hearing the facts and stats. They aren't even directly disagreeing with research. Instead, they're disagreeing with the sentiment, things are bad for people of color and we need change. Why? Well, Dr. Robin DiAngelo, a white critical racial and social justice scholar, has described the discomfort some white people have towards talking about racism as white fragility.
Yes, it must be that we're born with a genetic defect called white fragility.
Since white people often grow up in environments where discussing race is seen as taboo, some react defensively when the topic of racism comes up.
No. Our youth is dogmatically taught by people like you and other people in the media that white people talking about race is unacceptable thanks to their privilege.
Dr. DiAngelo says this manifests itself as outward displays of emotions, such as anger, fear, and guilt, and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and leaving the stress-inducing situation.
So being called a racist leads to arguments, ignoring the person who called you a racist, or leaving the situation altogether. I'm baffled, Franchesca. Truly baffled.
It's also hard to think about these issues on an institutional level, and because talking about racism automatically makes a lot of white people uncomfortable, they sometimes begin to think they're being personally attacked or blamed. Recent studies show that white Americans believe bias against white people is a bigger issue in our country than ever before.
Well, gee, I wonder what could be producing that train of thought. Perhaps it's the constant onslaught of fuck white people articles and videos that are constantly being force-fed to the American public via MTV, Huffington Post, news stations, and even our president and candidate for president.
This, however, is simply not true. Statistically, from mortgage lending to police brutality, the reality for white Americans tends to be way more positive than for black Americans and other people of color. So don't be mad at me, be mad at the stats.
Okay, I'll look at the stats. Blacks committed 52% of homicides between 1980 and 2008, despite composing just 13% of the population. Across the same time frame, whites committed 45% of homicides while composing 77% of the population, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Those damn racist facts.
A classic example is the bias associated with drug use. White people use drugs at similar rates as black people, but black people are much more likely to go to jail for drug usage because of the way we structure our policing practices.
I will concede that point here. Inner cities are more commonly populated with black people and are typically policed heavier due to higher crime rates, higher drug usage, and higher populations.
There's even bias in the political language we use to describe the issue. In the 80s, when crack became a huge problem, we had the war on drugs. But now with the prescription meds epidemic, which is largely affecting white communities, we're actually calling it what it is, an opioid epidemic. But when these issues are brought up, too often people accuse us of bias against white people. By refusing to engage with the actual issues, the people who shout the absurd accusation, "You're racist against white people," are really just attempting to shut down the conversation.
After that comment, I can't do any more of this. I can't take this seriously any longer. If you made it through the whole video, good job. I can't. I'm gonna end it here, and I'd like to thank everybody who watched this video and who watched my last video. This is all still a learning process for me, and I hope the videos are getting better. It's an excruciating process doing all this animation. This is about hour 9 or 10 that I've worked on this one video for, so I hope you guys all enjoyed it, and I'll be back later on in the week.